So is everybody tanked up with your? I shudder to think of what number cup of coffee if I look at myself. But is everybody all ready to go and awake? That's a good thing for this session. Great. Well, I've managed to meet most of you. I think I haven't had a chance to meet you. I'll get you later. My name is Richard Rubin. I'm a law professor at the University of Missouri. This is a session on mindfulness for lawyers. And before I really get started, let me just, I hate to get all kumbaya on you, but it is a mindfulness session. Can I ask you to kind of scoot in a little bit so we're just a little bit more intimate? You can leave a little bit of room, there's a little bit of room to kind of spread out a little bit, but if we can come in a little bit so I won't feel like I'm shouting or disconnected from you, I think that would be helpful. I have a very limited range of motion, I'm told. I've got a couple of announcements to make. I'm sure you've heard most of these already, but I will say them again. With regard to cell phones, we do need to ask for you to turn them off, or put them on silent mode. That'll be fine. This is unlike a lot of other sessions. This is probably not a good one to be checking your Facebook, and all of that on. So at any rate, with regard to Twitter, there are some people here who are tweeting this, I guess is what you'd say, tweeting this. And so if it's a distraction, let me know. I'm not that worried about it. But if it bothers you, please do let me know. With regard to CLE, some of you are students, some of you are practitioners. You are all doing it for the benefit, not for the CLE credit. This session does not get it. This is actually a very big national issue with regard to mindfulness and getting CLE credit for this. I can talk more about this later if you'd like to. But it is something that the organization that I work with is working on. So finally, this is being taped. The good news is that I'm the only one who is being taped. Okay? No one else will be seen. That's why you don't have to sign any waivers or anything like that. It's just me. So, you want a drink? You want to take a drink? Fine, go for it. It's absolutely fine. So let me just check in with my technician. We're good here? Okay. So, well, thank you for coming to this. This is it's an unusual session to have as a part of the ACS annual meeting. There are lots of other things that you could be going to. Let me just say a few things about myself and what I'm doing here. Then I'm going to kind of throw it out to you to find out what you're doing here. Okay. So first of all, as I mentioned, I'm a law professor at the University of Missouri. I cut my teeth, not in law actually, my professional teeth not in law, but covering the U.S. Supreme Court for many years. If we have any West Coasters here for the Daily Journal newspapers on the West Coast, I took my act after about 12, 13 years to the ABA Journal. So if my name sounds familiar to some of you older people, that's why. We haven't met, but that's why. I teach primarily in the public law area. So I do teach civil rights, Section 1983, for example, administrative law, legislation, election law, all the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. But I'm also just as passionate about lawyer and law student well-being because I know that this is a tough job, being a lawyer. And law schools do a very poor job. I should say they do a very good job of teaching us to think like lawyers. They do a very poor job of teaching us how to be lawyers in the world. I'm one of those who thinks that we need to do better at that. So I've actually spent a lot of time with that. I've practiced meditation, mindfulness for the past 20 years or so, and I've taught it for as long. I've been researching it. I've got an article coming out in probably early 2019 on the very first study that's ever been done on any legal population anywhere in the world. I looked and worked with law students at the University of Missouri, first-year law students. And as you know, there are a few things more stressful than the first year of law school, at least for most of us. Some of you skated through. I was not one of them. I can talk more about this a little bit later. Just briefly, I'll say that we got rather astounding results. And I'll say that the most significant thing that we found is that we tested for levels of stress. We tested for well-being. We tested for, in other words, just how happy you are. An odd question to ask a 1L, but we tested for that. We also tested on various attributes of mindfulness, such as the ability to manage distractions, the ability to be focused, et cetera. What we found was that midway through the first semester, the test group, was actually behind the control group. And so they sort of recognized that something would have been helpful. By the end of the semester, and we did it over 8 weeks, by the end of the semester, they were in better shape in terms of stress, in terms of their ability to focus and manage distractions, and in terms of overall happiness than not just the control group, but better than they were mid-semester, going into first year, first semester final exams. Can you imagine? No. So there's a lot more to that study that I can talk about, but I've made this a matter of research, and this one's going to be coming out, I could say, in early 2019. So, my goal here really is to, with regard to mindfulness, is to really help eliminate some of the suffering that goes on in the legal profession. It's something that I have dealt with. We've had, while they're not in law, we've had a couple of major suicide events. Andrew Bourdain and Kate Spade recently, and the numbers are rather staggering in law. Some of you may have heard of a 2016 study that was done by the ABA and the Hazelden Foundation. They surveyed about 15,000 lawyers, and they found, among other things, that about a third, a little bit more than a third, of those who responded tested or indicated that they viewed themselves as having a drinking or other substance abuse problem, or rising to the level of a problem. And if that many people are admitting to this kind of a problem, imagine how many others are in denial. So, I mean, it's a huge problem. That prompted a major initiative by the American Bar Association, the Conference of Chief Justices, the National Center for State Courts, the National Organization of Bar Counsel, and other leading institutions within the law to provide a set of recommendations. They came out August 2017, and these are recommendations for how to deal with this crisis in the legal profession, this crisis of for lack of a better term, unhappiness. And so one of the specific recommendations was mindfulness training, which I'm glad it wasn't the only one, but one. And so when ACS contacted me and asked me if I would like to come lead a workshop here on Saturday, I jumped at the chance. And the second, my second thought, my first thought, of course, was what a great opportunity. My second thought was, really? Mindfulness at the ACS annual meeting? So I've got some thoughts as to why it's really a good idea to do this here, right now. But I want to get a sense from you in terms of, before I give you my little list, what brings you here? I mean, you could be learning about what population, control, or how to count people and that kind of. What brings you here? Anyone? Yeah.
Well, we're in a time of absolute crisis as lawyers professionally and in the country we're in. So many of us know all the things that are going on in these sessions, but we're coming for reassurance and to meet like-minded people and get hope. So to get strength to go back and fight whether we're doing things in these areas or doing something else and feeling, why did I become a lawyer? Because I'm not working for the right cause right now, but I would like to. But we all can deal with mindfulness. I think it's the most logical thing in the world to have this session here, especially at this time.
Yeah, so you're more evolved than I was, I guess. But I like what you said about strength because it really does. We are warriors for justice. We are warriors for civil rights. We're warriors, I think, for the best side of the profession. This is not easy work. We stand in the face of the wind today, and right now it's a pretty brisk breeze. And so we need that strength. And this is something that mindfulness can be helpful with. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were starting to. Why else is somebody else here?
In order to do social justice work for a sustained period of time, being in the right place mentally makes a big difference.
Yeah, it is. You say being in the right place mentally, and that's a little different than the strength and the resilience. Can you say more about that? It sounds like sounds like you've been there.
Well, yeah, management of stress, the feelings of responsibility for not only yourself but for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
The feeling, being able to sort of, and being able to manage all of that, and being able to put it aside, and be able to take a mental break from things, and being able to put things in perspective, and the other aspect of mindfulness, being able to see from the perspective of others, including in this moment, being able to understand the motivations of some of the people who have different points of view.
Beautiful. You've been reading my notes, obviously, and you did a better job than I can. There was a lot in there. I will say that the thing that really struck out at me about that is the need for compassion. We don't really think about this work as an exercise in compassion. It is, and it's hard to do that work when we're having arguments about things that are common sense, when we can't use facts in our arguments, right? Because facts don't matter, and this is all powerfully frustrating, and so I think it implicates a couple of issues. One is the need for balance. In other words, to be able to maintain our balance in the face of this wind, in the face of rejection. Let's face it, most of us will lose more often than we win. The important thing is fighting the fight, right? And so we need that balance, and also that resilience to get back up and fight another day. As I mentioned, we're not going to win all of our battles. It's not going to happen. No matter how good lawyers we are, we're not going to win them all. Especially in the social justice area, especially. The important thing is standing up and doing what's right and fighting the fight. That's what's important, and that's not easy. It takes a toll on us. It asks us to be bigger than we are as individuals. And I love what you said about the responsibility for others. We do it out of, you said responsibility, and I would say it's compassion. I mean, a genuine respect for the plight of others, that others may not be in a position to help themselves, as we are in a position to help them. And so, we need that strength, we need that balance, that resilience, the ability to get back up and do it again because it's the right thing to do. And mindfulness can be very, very helpful in that regard. Anybody else in terms of what you're doing here, sir?
Speaking from the perspective of a law student, I'm just starting my third year now, and it's kind of a two-pronged thing in the sense of the bar exam is finally real, in the sense of
piece of cake.
Yeah, and I'm from California, so that's even something else. We had a 27% pass rate this past bar.
It's a big cake. But the good news is the state Supreme Court there took over the setting of the rate from the Bar Disciplinary Committee. For those of you who are not in California, it was a pretty big deal. I'm a member of the California Bar, I get it. But you too can pass the California Bar exam.
But then, so it's that overwhelmingness of, school's almost over, and that life-defining test is just a year away. And then also, it was really, being in law school and learning constitutional law and learning respect for the rule of law, yeah, and getting it really hammered into you in class, and then turning on the news and seeing, but that doesn't matter. And it was kind of deflating to a little bit when you're watching that and you understand the importance as you're just learning it, and then you're seeing it kind of mishandled in a practical use in actual government, and it comes together and kind of overwhelms sometimes, and you feel like, why am I doing this? Why it's not even working right now, and it's sometimes it can be overwhelming, and having a good mindset and a good practice logical step thinking when it comes to, no, but this is how you should feel about this, why are you feeling about this, and really deconstructing and kind of rebuilding your reason for being there.
Absolutely, it can be very overwhelming, and I feel if not overwhelmed, confronted by those issues as a teacher as you do as a student. I'm up there, preaching the doctrine, so to speak, of administrative law or election law, and I look outside and I know, this is not what's happening. But what's not happening is not right. Okay, and that's really important to remember. What we're trying to learn, what we're trying to teach, what we're trying to do, that's right. And it's very important for us to maintain that perspective. It really is. And this is where I come back to balance. One more. Yes, ma'am.
Just to add another dimension of what we get out of this day, which is I work in Colorado with a mentoring network of women who are all attorneys and we're all mothers, and most of us are progressive attorneys. So in addition to all these professional things that we've been talking about what you do at work and the work that you do, we're also all at home raising the next generation of good people, good citizens, and everything else, and trying to balance that and be able to bring that mindfulness in to not just ourselves, but to teach it to the small people we're raising at different ages. And I have 2 teenagers at this point, which is a whole nother thing. But
Girls or boys?
For the people, one of each.
Ooh.
So I don't know. But anyways, if we could just, like I said, keep that in mind too, of how any techniques we could get to be able to share with the mentoring that I do.
Yeah, no, that's
Personal and professional.
absolutely. It's when I said before that law school does not do a very good job of teaching us how to be lawyers, that includes not just being practitioners, but being human beings in this very difficult position. I mean, even those who are not involved in the kind of civil rights and social justice issues that most of the people here are. I mean, who are just doing a commercial litigation practice or some other practice. I mean, it's a tough job, and being able to let go of that, come back home from the office and actually be present with your kids, your significant other, your spouse. I mean, that is a huge task, and it's not an easy thing to do. So this is something that all of these things I will say are something that mindfulness training can be really helpful with. It is a practice. It's sort of I view it as a lifetime practice. Let me just ask now, how many of you here have already done some mindfulness meditation practice? Wow. How many of you have regular practices? There you go.
Are you talking about meditation or are you talking about mindfulness? I don't see those two things.
And you're actually right. Mindfulness and meditation are really two different things. Meditation is a vehicle for establishing mindfulness, but mindfulness is really a quality of mind. All right, it's this quality of present moment awareness. That's it. That's mindfulness, present moment awareness. I will add a few things to that. It's intentional. In other words, we have to be deliberate about it. And this is really hard for those of us in law. It's non-judgmental. And you say, what do you mean it's non-judgmental? That's what we're taught. In law schools, to judge. it's what we do, is we judge. And this, too, is a subject of debate within the mindfulness and law community. Do we even use that term? I think we can. I mean, I think you know what we're talking about. We're really talking about sort of discernment. Meditation is a vehicle for getting there. It's one of two vehicles that I'm going to use today to introduce this mindfulness practice with you. The first is meditation, a sitting meditation practice. The other is walking meditation. You can, or I should say, sort of walking mindfulness. The truth of the matter is, once you get down this idea of being present, and really that's all it is being present. You really can apply this skill to anything that you're going to do in life, from brushing your teeth to raising your kids, to dealing with a knotty issue on a brief or an argument that you're working on, or a difficult person that you're working with, maybe against your will. And so let me just say that everything that I'm going to talk about today, everything, is in the service of simply helping us be present. That's it. Okay? Now, this for me was a huge awakening when I first started learning about mindfulness these many years ago, because I thought, and meditation these many years ago, because I thought that this was something that you had to learn up in the mountains in the Himalayas, be in a cave for 15 years or so, and that it was, that there was some mysticism to it. And I'm going to shatter some myths about mindfulness and meditation here, because they're not true and they get in the way of learning. One of them is exactly that you don't have to spend 15 years in the Himalayas in order to be able to do this. The mindfulness practice is actually pretty simple, not easy, but pretty simple. I mean, it's something that anybody here can do it. Anybody here can do. Yes, sir.
So, would an example of mindfulness be each example for me that I'm here tonight? I chose to be here at this time rather than immigration and voting rights. So I see mindfulness as saying, I'm here to experience that.
And let me take it one step further than that. The short answer is yes and. Okay? So I mentioned this notion of intentionality. Okay, that's really important. Why? Well, probably most of us in this room right now are not present. I'm sorry. Most of us are probably thinking about something in the past. We're thinking about something in the future, something else I got to do, something else I could have done, blah, 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 blah. And so we're not really present. We're not really here right now. We're here physically. We're here in body. but our mind is wondering about the next panel, who I'm going to sit with at lunch, my flight, my this, oh, I forgot to call my kids, or something other than what we're doing now. This is the human condition. Don't feel bad about it, okay? This is our training, it is our conditioning, it is our expectations, it is society's expectations, and it's fine in some respects, to try to multitask in that way, but it's not being present, okay? And so when I say there's something more, a little bit more than just choosing to be here, that's part of it. That goes to the intention, okay? What also goes to the intention is not being somewhere else while you are here. That's hard, okay? So, everything that I'm going to say, all of it, is about coming to the present moment. That's simple, okay? It has a lot of benefits, including the ones we were talking about here. If you look on the internet, you'll find that it actually increases, the gray matter of your brain. I mean, it helps your immune system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for our purposes, it accomplishes some goals that we really need as lawyers doing the kind of work that we do and standing up for the kind of ideas that we're committed to. And so, so the first myth that I want to break, that I want to sort of cut through, is that there is something mystical about this. There's really not, okay? It's about being present. And we know why that is difficult, because most of us are kind of caught up in the past and caught up in the future for good reason. The second one that I want to dispel is that it is a religious practice. It's not. In other words, being present has nothing to do with any kind of a religious practice. Now, that said, it is absolutely true that mindfulness is a quality that is embedded within a lot of different faith traditions, most notably Buddhism, but also the Christian contemplative tradition. There is Jewish meditation. Pick your community of faith, and there's going to be a contemplative practice within that community. But the practice itself is completely secular. There is no religion to it at all. And it's kind of interesting. When I teach emotional intelligence, I do teach mindfulness as a part of it, mindfulness training, because it's a very good way to get in touch with your emotions. And I tell students, if this, if this tickles any of your spiritual ivories, let me know. I can point you in a direction that might be helpful to you. Never had a taker. I mean, it's just not that kind of practice. Okay. The third one, maybe the most important one, is that what it means, what mindfulness means, what meditation means, is emptying your mind of all thoughts, so that your mind is clear like a Colorado mountain brook, right? I've had so many people who I've worked with who have said, I tried it, I couldn't do it, I couldn't turn my mind off. Well, here's the good news. You can't. You're not going to turn your mind off. Forget it, okay? If you think about it, when you're asleep, you're dreaming. All that is the mind processing of what's going on and what went on during the day. That's all. The mind does not turn off, right? So those of you who have had that experience, when you've tried sitting and going, oh, I can't stop thinking, the good news is you're alive. I mean, this is good. What the practice does for us, it doesn't make those thoughts go away, okay? What it does is it helps us relate to them in a different way. And this really is, sort of the magic to it. I like to say that mindfulness is a third-person practice, okay? Because the operative point here, the operative principle, is to observe those thoughts rather than being those thoughts, okay? So if you're sitting and you're mad, right? The idea is sort of in the third person saying, I'm experiencing anger, rather than, I'm going to kill the guy, okay? So if there's one word, it's observe, it's notice, okay? And so we're not going to make those thoughts go away. That's not going to happen. That guy who's been meditating 75 years in a cave in the Himalayas, he's wondering why it's so cold outside. I mean, those thoughts are not going to go away. Okay? What we can do, and this is powerful, is we can learn how to relate to them more effectively just by watching them and not letting those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings control us. Okay? And this sort of gets back to Derek's point about the choice to be here to begin with. Okay? So, that's not going to happen. But we can learn how to relate to our thoughts a little bit differently. Okay? So, how do we do that? Well, this takes us into the mechanics of mindfulness. The good news is it's not the inside of a watch. Okay? That's complicated. This is pretty simple. Okay? Not easy, but simple. The way that we do this is by having an object of concentration. Okay? It could be this cup right there. Sometimes, you see images of people with candles. How many of you have seen this thing? The person meditating. Normally, it's a blonde female with beatific smile and the sunlight and everything. But all this is the use of the hands as an object of concentration. When the hand drops, we know our attention is not on the hands. Okay? So we've got this object of concentration, and what it does is it provides a baseline. Right? A baseline for what? A baseline for knowing when we're not concentrating, when we're lost in thought, when we're thinking about the past, when we're thinking about the future. Okay? Most of us, we're cruising through our days. We got a million things to do. Okay? We don't have that baseline. And so with intention, when we're practicing mindfulness meditation or mindfulness in any way, we are deliberately being present, giving ourselves a baseline so that we know when we're not present. Okay? Best example I could think of is a busy train station. The one that comes to my mind is the Munich train station. Has anybody been to the Munich train station? Has anybody been to a big train station? Lots of trains coming and going. Okay. Munich is pretty big, and you can see a lot of trains at the same time. So you can think about this practice as being at a big train station, and those trains being thoughts or feelings, worries about the past, concerns about worries about the future. All those things are trains, and what we do in this practice is we have an object of concentration. We normally don't use a cup like this. We normally use the breath, and that's what I'll work with today. But we use this object of concentration so that we know when we have actually gotten onto one of those trains. So you're in law school, you're rising 2L or 3L? 3L. 3L, okay. So you took con law this year maybe? Or first this year? Okay. So any other students here? Okay, so you know this experience, right? You're in torts and you're thinking about property or your research paper, for first year writing. And so if we can imagine, ourselves as being in that train station, while we're there in law school, and we've got the torts train going by, and we've got the property train, we've got the job train, we've got the student loan, we got all those trains going back and forth. The idea is not to get on any of those trains, just to watch them. That's all we want to do is just watch the trains. That's it. Because that's what's happening at present. And it is being at that station, seeing all the trains going back and forth, that allows us to know when we've gotten on a particular train. All right? We don't know that we're on torts, on the torts train, until we've kind of gone a little bit of a distance, and suddenly realize, oh, wait a second, I'm in con law, and I'm thinking about torts, right? And those of you who are in practice, easy analogies, I'll let you come up with your own. So that's what we're doing, is using a baseline, an object of concentration, so that we know when we're distracted from that which we want to be concentrating on, which is basically being present. That's our commitment, to be present. Okay? So, what does the practice look like? It looks like this. If we're at the train station, at some point we're going to get on the torts train. We're going to get, on the, I've got to get in my job application train. We're going to do that. And it's simply the act of recognizing. All we do is just recognize, hey, I'm on the train. And what do you think we do then? Get off at the next stop and come back to the present. Okay? And again, this present, for us, for our purposes of practice, the present is simply what we have intentionally decided to use as our object of concentration in this moment. Okay? So, in terms of the practice, that's it. Not so easy. There are a lot of trains. Some of them are pretty fast. Some of them are pretty attractive. Neat cars. Nice, dining cars and lounges. They can be very attractive. And so we work with that. We work with those thoughts and learn how to let go of them. This is hugely powerful. Let me say one other point, and then I'll open up for questions in just a second. One other point here that I mentioned was this notion of non-judgmentalness. Okay? What we want to be in this practice is sort of without value judgments. In other words, without a sense of right and wrong. Okay? Now, I know that really feels counter to sort of why we're doing here, sort of doing the work of the Lord, as they say. But what we want to be in this practice is non-judgmental. Okay? In other words, just because a thought arises, all it means is that thought arises. The thought itself is not inherently good or bad. It is. Or an emotion, when it arises, it's not inherently good or inherently bad. It just is. Now, this is easier said than done. Okay? And so we should look at this as an aspiration, as something to aspire to. I don't want to say, a goal, because, the goal really is simply to be present, and it helps to be present to let go of those judgments. That requires, first of all, recognizing that we're being judgmental. Okay? Most of us don't even realize it. And I've been practicing 20 years. I still have plenty of judgments. I don't necessarily react to them now in the same way that I used to. I don't have to. I can control them rather than them controlling me. But the first task is simply recognizing when we are being judgmental and recognizing that there's no inherent truth to the judgments that we have. They may be our preferences. I may prefer that there not be noise outside while I'm practicing, but I can still practice. I can still meditate. I can still be mindful with noise outside. And to the extent that I'm able to incorporate noise outside into my experience of the present moment, I'm better off. I'm embracing it rather than pushing it away. Okay? So this non-judgmentalness, this not imposing value judgments on what comes up, whatever comes up, is pretty powerful. First of all, because we learn what we really think about stuff. We learn what's really important about stuff as it's coming up. And we learn how to let go, even of some pretty powerful things. Pam Carlin, at her introductory talk, was talking about the Learned Hand Spirit of Liberty speech, which I also commend to you. One of the central points there was that, he said that the spirit of liberty is the spirit of, not being too sure that you're right. Well, that's true with regard to this practice as well. I mean, just because we have these thoughts, just because we have these judgments, doesn't necessarily mean they're right. I mean, they exist, like a train. But if we, the aspiration is not to imbue them with something, with any kind of value that they don't inherently already have. So, I think by sort of summarize this piece, what mindfulness is a quality of mind. Meditation is a way to help cultivate and foster that quality of mind. And that quality of mind really consists of simply being present, being open to whatever happens, with equanimity rather than judgment, being able to accept even our darker sides, when we see them, and that of the other, and that of others as well. It does require an effort, intentionality, a commitment. It's like any other exercise, If you want to exercise, you got to do it. And because we're so habituated to being, thinking, to multitasking about the past and the future, we really don't think too much about being present. And so we have to force ourselves, okay, I'll be present. And this practice cultivates this by giving us a very specific tool. I mean, it's a concrete tool. We're going to use that object of concentration. We'll actually work with the breath, but we're going to use an object of concentration. And when we're not attentive to the object of concentration, we know, thank you, we know that we're distracted. And all we do is just let go of whatever was distracting us and bring our attention back to this object of concentration. That's it. Now, one last point. When I say we're not judgmental, that's right. When I say all we're doing is just observing, that's right. Let me just add one more gloss to that, and that is to be curious about that, about what you're observing. There's so much that we don't see that is right before us. And what this practice gives us the opportunity to do is to actually see that for the first time, sometimes, and to notice more and more about what's present. There's a great story about Louis Agassiz, a great scientist. Some of you may have read about him in undergrad, these many years ago. He used to give his grad students a dead fish, and he'd say, "Study that and come back tomorrow." And they'd come back and he'd say, "Well, what did you see?" He'd say, "Saw a dead fish. Smells kind of bad. It's got scales." "Really?" "That's it?" He goes, "Pretty much." And he'd say, "Well, go back and come back in a week and look at that fish." And as they looked at this fish, they would, with those instructions, they would notice the nature of its scales, the color of its scales, the texture. They would notice it's face. The fish have faces. Whether they have lips, the nature of their mouths, how their eyes are constructed. All of this. And so my point is that there's always more to see in the present moment. Okay, but we do have to look for it. Okay, and to do so with a sense of curiosity, not a sense of judgment, but a sense of curiosity, genuine curiosity. What's it like in this moment? Always remembering that what that cup looks like and the qualities of that cup are going to be different tomorrow. It'll probably be crushed tomorrow, right? And so we're looking at this object of concentration right now with a sense of almost a scientist curiosity. So that's the basic idea. Let me ask if there are any questions. Yeah.
I guess I just have a question more about how you can control mindfulness when there's so many distractions like technology, especially within the classroom. I have a hard time not getting distracted, not being, just thinking about other things.
Wonderful question.
I understand the train kind of metaphor and trying to not get on that train.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, one of the classes that we had with no technology was maybe one of my best classes of being there. But it's also, it also can be a benefit to have technology. So I guess just balance of like, where do you find it's easiest to practice when you do have those easy distractions?
So let me answer part of that question and defer part of that question. The part I want to defer is about establishing a practice, because I want to go ahead and do a little bit first, and then we can talk about how to establish a practice. But it's a wonderful, the part that I do want to answer, and that's a wonderful question, is, what do you do with all these distractions? There's a lot of distracting stuff out there. There's a lot on my mind. There is. And that is exactly what we are, that's the muscle that we're building up as we practice mindfulness, because what we're doing initially is learning how to identify, for step one, and then let go of those distractions, whatever they are. Okay? Now, sometimes they can be very powerful. You get into a fight with your wife or your significant other or your kids or whoever. That's a pretty powerful distraction, right? And we learn that this practice teaches us how to let go of that for now. We'll come back to it, okay? And so a lot of people, and I guess this is another misconception. A lot of people say, "Well, geez, I was overwhelmed with distractions, with a distraction. And every time my mind would settle, something else would distract it. And I'd get to that distraction, I'd go, I can't do this." That is not a bad moment. That is actually a good moment, okay? Because remember, most of us don't know that we're distracted. Most of us don't know that we're not present. And so the moment when you realize, oh, wait a second, I'm distracted, that's the moment that you know what you have to let go of, that you can bring it back. So how do you manage something like that in the classroom? Well, one way, don't turn on your computer. Don't, and this gets back to intent. Just don't do it. I'm a big walker. And I count my steps, and I use my phone to count my steps. Never actually use it, never check it while I'm walking. I don't do it. Instead, I actually practice mindful walking. And we'll do a little bit of that in just a bit. But, one of the things that this practice gives us is this ability the strength, there she is, the strength to to make that choice. I'm not going to turn my laptop on. In class, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to check Facebook. I'm not going to do it. When I'm walking, I'm not going to use my phone. I'm not going to take a phone call. I'm not doing it. This is power. Not to have to do everything that the mind tells us to do. This is power. Yes, ma'am.
It's not always the mind telling you to do it. It's not the person.
I'm sorry, having a little trouble hearing?
It's not always the mind that's telling you to do it. It can be another person, right? It can be interactions of other humans. How do you, you can turn off your phone, but how can you turn off your boss or your significant other, or family member who wants something?
That's a really good question, and it goes to the distinction between a formal mindfulness practice like sitting meditation, okay, and practice in your everyday life, okay? When we do a formal sitting practice, and we're going to do something in just a second. When we do that, it's like going to the gym. You know, we're learning and exercising our attention muscles. We're exercising our letting go muscles. We're exercising our recognition muscles, and all of that, you know, sort of strength building we can bring to us in you know, our daily lives, okay, including dealing with our boss, okay, even a boss we don't like, okay, because we can stay, you know, it does help us stay focused on the immediate task at hand and not get all caught up in the judgments of what we think about that boss, justifiable as they may be. We learn how to let go of that. We learn how to say, okay, I'm going to be here right now. I'm not going to tell the boss what I really think of them. or their idea. So that's one way. The other way is just to recognize sometimes, you know, we have to, I mean, be practical. I mean, we have to sometimes multitask. We have to, but for our formal practice, that's time we set aside. And we say intentionally, I'm going to sit, I'm going to practice now. I'm going to practice these strength-building exercises. So I'll talk more about how to bring that into practice, you know, into our daily lives in a little bit, but I hope that starts to answer the question. Others? Okay. So I think we've got a timekeeper or two or three out there. How are we doing? 50? Yes. Sounds great. Okay, so you ready to give it a shot? Think so? Okay. So first thing I want to talk about is taking your seat. Okay. Now you're probably thinking that in order to do this, you have to you know, sit lotus style on a cushion. You know, the sun has to be, you know, again, beating down on you and, you know, bringing you bliss. Nonsense, okay? What we want is to have a posture that supports our ability to sit still, and to sit still so that we can notice more about what's going on in the present moment, okay? I cannot do a lotus, a full lotus. My body does not bend that way. If yours does, more power to you. I can't do a half lotus. I probably couldn't do a quarter lotus if there was one. I sit in a chair, and all I can say is that there are simply no extra points for doing a lotus position. I mean, it's just not. You can become perfectly present sitting in this chair. So why not? You know, let's make this easy, right? But we do want our posture to support our practice. Okay, so this is not a practice about shoulds. Okay, this is not emphatically not a practice about letting go of shoulds, honestly. This is a practice that is, you know, that we do intentionally for the reasons that I've stated. And so what you want to do is just, I would suggest, sit in a chair. Don't even go out and buy a cushion. None of that fancy stuff. You don't need any fancy clothes, nothing. Okay? Just sit down. It's actually the most important part of the practice. It's like going to the gym to work out. The most important part is getting there, right? And so all we want to do is just get a chair, just like this. You're fine with what you want really is a straight back chair, because if you're slouching like this, you're not going to be able to do it, for an extended period of time. And the longer that you sit, I will say that the longer that you sit, the more that you're able to see about what's going on in the present moment, because you're letting go of distractions, and it's kind of like your eyes getting used to the dark, right? If you go right outside into the dark, you can't see anything. If you're out there for half an hour, you can see everything, right? Unless you're driving, unless I'm driving. So just sit right here in your chair, feet about shoulder width apart. I will be honest with you and tell you that I spent about 6 months wondering what I was supposed to do with my hands. It doesn't matter, okay? Here's what matters. You don't want to cut off your circulation, okay? That's what matters. What I do is I just rest my hands on my lap. Just that simple. Sometimes I'll rest them, in each other. Sometimes they'll be next to each other. Again, what you want is a posture that's going to support your ability to be still. Okay? That's it. And be still so that you can observe. That's it. Okay? I do not, especially when you're getting started, I do not recommend lying down, although lying down is a perfectly fine meditation posture. The problem with lying down is that you might fall asleep, which is not inherently bad, but it's not what we were supposed to be. It's not what we intended to do. So at any rate, hands just like this. Now, in some religious practices, they say, well, you should have your hand like this, or like, left on top of right, or right on top of left, or on your. Don't worry about it. Okay? Don't worry about it. Just get yourself into a comfortable posture. Okay? Now your back should be straight as you're sitting here, not rigid like a board. You don't want that. You're not at attention. Okay? Instead, think of yourself as sitting with dignity. Okay? You're actually doing yourself a favor. Okay? So sit. The way that I like to think about it is, if you can imagine yourself a puppet, okay, being held up by a string rope. Okay? Your back is going to be straight, but you can kind of poke that puppet and move it, and so it'll be straight. Your head's going to be tilted down about 45 degrees, and that's really what we want to do with our sitting posture, is have our head down about 45 degrees. The way that I teach this is with eyes closed. There are other people teach it eyes open. Zen, you may have heard of Zen meditation. They typically do it eyes open for philosophical reasons. From my perspective, it's one less set of distractions, the visuals, and it allows us more to concentrate on the experience of our present moment. So when I do this, I'll invite you to close your eyes. If you really can't do it, or if you feel uncomfortable, that's fine too. You don't have to. But I would say that it would be good to keep your eyes, your gaze sort of at a 45 degree angle. And what else can I tell you about posture? I think I'm good. Any questions about that? Kind of got the idea here? Okay, so I had you come in to bring us together. Now I want you to kind of give yourselves a little bit of elbow room. Back in the 60s, we'd have said, give your aura a little bit of space. And then we'll go ahead and try it. And what I'm going to do is just a short practice to give us some felt sense of experience. And what I'm going to do is start off by working with the senses, because one of the things that is, you can kind of break down what's going on in the present moment, into two categories. It's either external or internal, right? And so the externals come to us through our senses of sight, sound, smell, right? The internals are our thoughts, our feelings, thoughts about or emotions about thoughts, that type of stuff, mental reactions. That's internal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the externals and then work with the body itself. What I mean by that is bringing our attention to the body itself. In other words, bringing this present moment awareness, using the body as this object of concentration. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of walk you through this, and then we'll end up at the breath. Okay, and then we'll stay with the breath for a while. Then we'll stop and kind of talk about it. So just a couple of points about the breath. Again, I'm going to ask you to notice your breath. And you might say, what's there to notice, right? You'll be surprised. Notice in this moment its different qualities, its different depths. So for example, you might notice how deep you're breathing. Some of you might think that you're supposed to breathe deeply. No, 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 no. There are no shoulds. Okay? What you're supposed to do is simply notice how deep you're breathing right now. It will probably change in a minute or two. Okay? So just notice the breath, notice the texture, whether it's rough or coarse, whether it's deep, whether it's shallow. Notice whether it's more on one side of your body than the other. Notice whether it's consistent or inconsistent. Just, like I say, just be that student of Louis Agassiz with the dead fish, and just notice what there is to observe about your breath in this moment. Okay? Now, a couple of tips. First of all, where do you do this? One place is at the tip of your nostrils, just kind of noticing the breath coming in and sweeping across the tip of your nostril. On the in-breath, then again on the out-breath. So that's one place. That may be easy and natural for you. If so, great, go for it. Another place is at the chest. Okay, so you can notice the rising of the chest on the in-breath and the falling of the chest on the out-breath. And if that's easier for you to connect with the experience of your breath than the nostrils, go for it. No extra points for using the nostrils. Another place is right there at the belly. Noticing how the belly expands on the in-breath and contracts on the out-breath. And if that's easier for you than the nostrils or the chest, go for it. You might find that what you really want to do is to go back and forth between them. Fine. Whatever it takes to get you to the present moment is fine, okay? Because that's really all we're trying to do, is use this breath as an object of concentration to know when we're distracted. So, last point about this is that it's not a staring contest, okay? Gaze lightly at your breath. Don't outstare it. It's not like you're with your cat or something. Just notice it. Just notice it, and notice when you're not doing it. So, last chance for questions before we blast off. Everybody feel kind of comfortable? Okay. So, let me just invite you to take your seat. That's the most important part. It's just getting here. You've done the hard work, and so for right now, you might just take a breath out and just let go of everything that you've been doing today. You can take another breath and let go of everything that you have to do, and give yourself permission to simply be present now and just notice what is going on right now without any judgments, without any blame or anything like that, just noticing. And so we might begin just by noticing the experience of sound in this room right now. Are there any sounds? What direction are they coming from? Do we hear them more on one side than the other? Is it a loud sound or a soft sound? Is it consistent or inconsistent? In other words, what's our experience of sound in this moment? Not wishing that the sound wasn't there, not glad that it is, just noticing what's going on with sound in this moment. I know there's some talking going on, and so we might notice the mind's reaction to that. And in the same way, we can notice what's going on with the visuals. I know for most of us, our eyes are probably closed, but there's still shades of darkness and lightness in this moment. Where is it brighter? Where is it shadier? Can we notice the points at which the lightness begins to fade and the darkness begins to get darker in this moment? We might also notice the experience of touch. That's one of our senses. And touch is a wonderful sense to work with because there are so many points of contact in this moment that most of us would otherwise just overlook if we weren't intentional about noticing it. So, for example, we might notice our feet on the floor. And we might notice whether one is in front of the other. Doesn't matter. Just noticing. We might notice whether their weight on the floor is the same, whether our right foot feels as heavy on the floor as our left. Again, doesn't matter. We might notice whether our feet are more on the ball of the foot than on the back of the foot. And just noticing this experience of our feet on the floor right now. We might notice the experience of our foot inside the shoe. For example, I'm wearing laced shoes, and I can feel the lace tighter at the knot, and the lace is looser toward my toes. I can actually feel my foot inside my shoe, where the toe ends and the shoe ends, and that gap in between them. And I can notice that. I can notice the socks that I'm wearing and my feet inside the socks, inside the shoes. That's happening in this moment. And so what is your experience as you're observing the feet on the floor. In this same way, we might notice our knees, the bend of our knees. Maybe for some of you, there may be an old injury or something that makes them particularly pronounced, but even if not, our knees are there, and when we take the time to notice it, we can actually notice and feel the bend in our knees. We can notice the feeling of our thighs on the chair. And with this sense of curiosity, we might notice whether one thigh is more on the chair than the other. We might notice the very point at which the thigh is on the chair and no longer on the chair. And just noticing this experience of the thighs being on the chair. We can also notice the experience of gravity in this moment. The feeling of our weight on the chair and the outline of our rears on the seat of the chair. And just notice that experience of our weight on the chair. Our knees bent, our feet on the floor. We can also notice the small of our back resting against the chair, the back of the chair. And as we notice what that feels like, we might notice that there's a point at which the back no longer is touching the back of the chair. And we can notice this broad expanse of our backs. And as we do that, we might notice that there's some tension. A lot of us carry our tension in our backs. We might notice that there's a knot or a stretching sensation that really is that tension. And so rather than wish the tension wasn't there, we might just notice what the experience of that tension is. Is it knotty? Is it a burning sensation? Is it a stretching sensation? And what happens when we bring our attention to that? Oftentimes it'll just go away. And so we can notice that. We can also notice our arms protruding out from our bodies, torsos. How often do we notice that? And yet there are many points of touch and contact. There's the point where the arm is no longer connected to the body, where it's independent. There's I can feel right now that part of my arms are touching my torso. My wrists are resting in my lap. My hands are touching each other. And I can notice the sense of warmth at the hands. Is this your experience? And with this same sense of curious attention, we can notice the head resting on the neck, tilted slightly downward. We might be able to notice the hair on the head and the weight of the hair. Maybe it's touching our faces, our shoulders, or ears. We might notice our faces. A lot of us, interestingly enough, carry tension in our faces, and so we might notice our foreheads right now. Is it tight or relaxed. Doesn't matter. It's not about a judgment, just noticing how it is in this moment. And what happens when we bring our attention to it? We might notice our eyebrows and our eyes, lashes resting one on each other. And we might notice whether they're tightly pursed or more relaxed. Again, no judgments, just noticing. We might notice the mouth, the chin. Again, whether they're tighter or looser. And with the same kind of curiosity, we can bring our attention to the breath. Noticing very simply the in-breath and the out-breath. Wherever it's easiest, wherever it's most natural for us to connect with, we might notice the sweep of the breath on the in-breath at our nostrils, the very tip of our nose. We might notice the sweep of our breath at the nostrils on the out-breath. Or maybe it's easier to connect with the breath at the chest, and so we can experience the rising of the chest on the in-breath and the falling of the chest on the out-breath. Or perhaps the belly, noticing the expansion of the belly on the in-breath and its contraction on the out-breath. And so we can, for the next few minutes, rest in the knowledge that all we need to do right now is simply observe what's going on with the breath. Give ourselves permission to let go of all those other thoughts, all those other feelings, and just notice whether the breath is deep or shallow, whether the breath is rough or smooth, whether it's consistent or inconsistent. And if the mind has wandered or become distracted, we just notice that too. And we simply acknowledge it and then let go of it and bring our attention back to the breath. Maybe connecting with the body first, if that's easier. But then bringing the attention to the breath and once again just noticing the in-breath and the out-breath. That's all. And again, if the mind has wandered, we know the mind's going to do that. And so we just note that. Sometimes it helps to give it a name, noise. And then bring the attention back to the breath, back to the body. Connecting again with this present moment, this sensory experience of the present moment. Noticing the in-breath And the out breath. At the nostrils or the chest or the belly, doesn't matter. And again, if the mind has wandered, we just notice that and let go of whatever that distraction was. Might notice any judgments that have formed about it. Let go of those too. And just bring the attention back to the body, back to the breath, reconnecting with what our senses are telling us what's happening in this moment. The experience of the breath. And in these last moments of our practice right now, we might just notice the body again. Notice how it feels, whether it feels tight or loose. We might notice our minds, whether they feel tight or loose. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to the day. So I have to confess that whenever I say that, my first thought in my mind is, do I have to? So, particularly for people who haven't done this before, what was that experience like for you?
A little disorienting.
Disorienting. How so?
After a while, you forget you're in a room with people, and it's there's little distractions that kind of try and pull you back into that, like, oh, there's still people in the room. But after a while, it's like those distractions stop pulling you back, and then
Kind of get in the zone.
I was like, whoa.
You kind of get in the zone. Yeah. Other reactions? Yes, ma'am. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I'm sorry. You're thinking too hard about what?
Not thinking about other things. But I would like watch the trains and like, okay, focus on watching the trains instead of like focusing on my breath.
You'll get the hang of it. You know, it's just a matter of getting the hang of it. Look, if the train analogy doesn't work for you, it's like you're going to a movie. Okay? You're going to a movie, you're watching the movie of your mind. Ooh. But, you know, pull up some popcorn. Just watch. Just watch. Yeah. But it takes practice because we're used to being our thoughts rather than observing them. How do you feel right now? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I mean, after 3 days of convention, I started falling asleep like a number of times. So I actually had to get up. But then I was able to sit back down. Then I was a little bit more.
So good. There's a reason that you're falling asleep. Yeah. Exactly right. And so this, you're laughing, but this is not insignificant, okay? Because most of us don't or have a problem giving ourselves permission to rest and sleep. I don't know how many people here have problems sleeping at night. My students habitually do. I can share with you a wonderful experience out of the mindfulness training that I did for that study. Again, this was 1Ls, and about midway through, I had them kind of talk with each other. So and I gave them some prompts to talk about. I said, so what's the most surprising thing, about this? And one of them said, the most surprising thing for me was a female, and she said, since I was 12 or 13, I have had sleep disorder, and I've not been able to get, more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. And she said, since I started this, this study, I have been sleeping 8 hours a night. And she said, it's amazing to me. And it can actually be very helpful to do when you're preparing to go to bed. Because most of us have trouble getting to sleep because we don't give ourselves permission to do so. We've got one more thing to figure out, one more problem to solve. Instead of saying, okay, I'll get to it in the morning. So, good. Other reactions to this? Yeah.
I used to do hypnosis, and it's similar.
Is it? I used to be interested in hypnosis, but I couldn't do that. This I can do.
Well, I've always been better at hypnotizing others than hypnotizing myself.
But this is, I would say this is not so much, getting into a hypnotic state, as it is simply getting into an aware state. Just being aware. And, you really can. What's your name? Nathan. I mean, as Nathan was saying, he's kind of got lost and forgot where he was. I mean, you can lose track of the fact that you've got a body. I mean, you just become aware. And this is a very cool thing. I mean, you can learn a lot about yourself. Because, what there is to learn is what's going to come up. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a lot of sports injuries, and I used to do a lot of physical therapy, and I get massages and things like that, and it really reminded me of that peace and calmness that I would feel if I was getting my knee worked on or my back worked on. And there was a couple of times I started falling asleep, but then I would try to focus on my breath again, and it had that same kind of feeling that I would get, when I was going through that process.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. There's a great story about, the old monks, back in 500 years ago, and the ones who used to fall asleep, the abbot, the monastery would put them on the edge of a well. So they stayed awake. Sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you're just tired. It's okay. And if that's how, for me, I sit 30 minutes a day, most days. Sometimes I fall asleep. I needed it. I'm fine. It's fine. So let me ask, how do you feel now relative to how you felt when you walked in those doors? You feel more relaxed? Anyone else feel more relaxed? Yeah?
So I think I was dealing with a lot of anxiety about the day, and I was concerned that I was going to feel more anxious, not thinking about all those things and spending that time preparing for all the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But right now I feel so much more ready, and so much calmer, and it's just a good reminder that it's worth that short amount of time. It's productive. Take a pause and
Yeah, we might have sat 10, 15 minutes tops, And I've had people, report similar reactions. And I would describe that as it sounds like you feel more refreshed and a little bit less anxious. And I've had people sit with 3 minutes, 5 minutes, And so I always say, one good breath, that's all I need. Does anybody else feel a little bit more refreshed? I mean, almost like you might have taken a nap? Yeah. And there really is a reason for this. And I don't want to bore you with, the details of the neuroscience of it, but let me just say that what we're doing or one of the things that's happening when we're practicing is we are resetting our nervous systems, okay? So you may have heard about the so-called fight or flight response. You probably remember that. In neuroscience, they refer to this as the sympathetic state and the parasympathetic state of our nervous systems. The parasympathetic state is when our body is relaxed. So like when we're asleep, okay? We don't have all of our hormones running, to protect ourselves and everything. And then we wake up, and we live in a pretty challenging world. There's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, who was it? You're the one with kids. You wake up in the morning, and the first thing you see is those kids, and they're screaming, and or they're not wearing something that's inappropriate, or whatever. We're challenged there. Then we have to drive, and then we get into the office, and there's our boss. Where is she? There's our boss, and this stuff. What it does is it jacks up our fight or flight response. I mean, literally, it increases it. We go from DEFCON 1 to DEFCON 4, and that's where we're sort of operating all through our day, right? And so what this does is it allows us to deliberately stop and reset that. Even though we're not going to sleep, we're actually getting very similar benefits. I mean, there is a science behind this, right? How else does somebody else feel? I mean, now as compared to, yes, sir?
I lost a sense of time, and it was great.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does that feel?
And then when you stopped, I asked him, what time to be there? What's our time? And last time I heard it was 50 minutes, and then he said 15. I said, wow. So it did feel like I lost a sense of time. It just did.
Yeah, it's because we're present. We're just noticing what's going on now. And, the clock at that point doesn't matter. Now, where are we on time?
10.
10 minutes? Okay. So I do recommend for people getting started, or for people, who have been practicing like myself for 20 years, I do recommend a timer. Because, one of the tricks that my mind will play on me is it'll say, ooh, it's already been, you've only given this 10 minutes and it's already been 10. And I'll look down, 1, and so, I mean, I started off with your basic, back in the day, Kmart kitchen timer. Just, $5, $3 kitchen timer. It's fine. Now, we've got apps on our cell phones. A couple of popular ones. The one I use is called Insight Timer. It's free. They've got lots of guided meditations if you like guided meditations, and it's a good app. Headspace is also a popular one. My sister recently told me she uses one called Calm, C-A-L-M. That's very nice. But you can say, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 minutes. That's it. And give yourself permission to let go of all this crap for 5 minutes. You'll be better off. You don't have to meditate or be mindful for 30 minutes. Okay. I think as you become accustomed to the practice, as you become accustomed to seeing in the dark, you'll want to. But I started off with a minute. I mean, literally a minute. I took my sofa cushion up to the attic. I was sitting between a bunch of boxes for 1 minute, and I came down. I told my wife how proud I was of myself, meditating. And I got up to 3 minutes, and then I was like a guru, and I think it's much more important to try to do it regularly than it is to go for distance, go for time. Because like I say, you can get these benefits in a minute. I mean, literally, you can get it in a minute. You're resetting that button of your nervous system. And so, if you don't, well, let's put it this way. I tell my students when I'm teaching this that If you can do it for half an hour, great. American standard meditation time is probably 20. When I do the study, I ask for 15. I probably get 10 every day. If all you can do is 5, it's fine. It really is. And if you don't have time for 5 minutes, I think we have identified the problem, okay? So, other tips for establishing a home practice. One thing that's really helpful is to set aside a space for it. In other words, a space where you know when you're there that you're going to meditate. You're going to practice this formal mindfulness meditation practice. You know that. If you don't have room for that, a chair, just a chair, and say, that's my sitting chair. But it's about establishing this intentionality. It doesn't matter when you do it. You do it when it works well, when it works best for you. I mean, when you'll actually do it. Some people like to meditate the very first thing in the morning. I did that for many, many years before all hell broke loose with the family. Before they got up. Now it's different. A lot of my students actually like to practice between classes or as a moment of transition between school and home. That works. I have a number of people who tell me they prefer to do it at night before they go to bed. As sort of preparation, part of this permission giving to go to sleep. So it really doesn't matter when you do it. The point is to establish that intention to do it. That's what's important. What if you miss a day? So what? Don't kill yourself. I mean, this is not a practice that invokes guilt. It is a practice that lets go of guilt. Okay? If you miss a few days, fine. It's fine. Come back to it. If you miss a month, fine. Come back to it. If your life is really not in a position where you can do it, maybe you've got young kids, it's harder. Make those kids your practice. Make them your object of concentration. You can do that. But it's not about, where the heart's there, the mind's going to follow. And if you want to do it, if it's something that you feel is valuable to you, you'll make the time. Now, June 2018 may not be the time for you. And, you may do this and say, oh, well, that was interesting, but not really. And in a couple of years, you might say, I felt good for that 5 minutes. And I think I'd like to come back to that. Then you're ready. You'll be fine. So we're getting there in terms of time. Let me just ask if there are any other questions that I might be able to. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, did you say what were those apps again?
Yeah, so the apps are, that I mentioned, were Insight Timer, 2 words, Headspace, Calm, C-A-L-M. There are a bunch of them out there. I like Insight Timer because it's free. So I should also, as you're coming up with questions, I should also let you know that I'm the president and chair of the Mindfulness and Law Society. It is a new nonprofit that is really designed to create a national community for those lawyers who are interested in mindfulness and yoga, other contemplative practices. We're having a major conference in Chicago in August 3rd as part of the ABA. Judge Ricardo Urbina is going to be our keynote speaker, which is pretty impressive. You know Judge Urbina. He's a pretty amazing guy. Is that? Yep. He's an amazing guy, and it'll be introductory. One of the interesting things is that it's being co-sponsored by the ABA ABA Center for Professional Responsibility, because they know that the more present we are in our in our daily lives, the more likely we're going to be to make wise choices with regard to our ethical responsibilities. It's also being co-sponsored by the National Task Force on Attorney Well-Being, because they know that this is a practice that can help people who are interested in giving it a try. The National Organization of Bar Council, these are the bar disciplinary people, the people that you never want to meet, right? They are they're co-sponsoring it because they know that one of the real issues with regard to bar licensure is substance abuse. Unfortunately, it is culturally acceptable and expected within the legal profession to work hard and drink hard and party hard. And I'm there too. But some people really have a problem with that, and it gets them into very bad trouble. And so they're co-sponsoring this because they see it as as a tool that can help people who are interested. So I invite you to consider joining the organization. It's only $75 and a lot of support. If you're in Chicago or interested in going for it, it's really going to be, I think, an important moment. So, end of commercial. Yeah.
Do you recommend any books about the subject and/or TV classes or other sort of?
Yeah, there are some great books out there, just fabulous books. A good, sort of, secular book. It's called 10% Happier by Dan Harris. He is a broadcast journalist with ABC News, I think. I might be wrong. But he has a wonderful book. It's a very light and fun read. It's not so much a training manual as it is, what the experience of doing this is, but it's good. You'll like it. And his sort of coming to grips with this being something that he might like to do. So that's good. And I can give you some others, maybe afterwards. It depends on what it is that you're really interested in, because there's just so much out there. Other questions? There are, in the starter kit, we did come up with a starter kit for you. There are basic instructions that are very similar to what we did here. There are some resource links to resources that'll have books and other types of resources as well. Other questions? How am I doing?
20 seconds.
It's been fun. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.